Hey guys, welcome to JPT. I'm Carson G, and this is Just Plain Tech. This is just an example, but this could be something totally different. Say, I don't know, you're looking to get Linux on a website, and you go to details, and it says, this Linux distribution, Ubuntu for example, is an open source operating system licensed under the General Public License, or GPL, blah blah blah, and you're like, okay, I get that, but what does open source actually mean, and what's closed source, and I just don't know. First, let's start off with what most of you probably know and are probably using right now: closed source, also known as proprietary software. Now, basically, proprietary software often has a price, which none of us like paying for things. Let's be honest. If everything was free, it'd be amazing. But sadly, everything's not. But closed source software often has a price, and it's not just that. Most of the time, even after you do buy it, people such as Microsoft and Apple, and sometimes even other companies, will, instead of giving you actual ownership to the software or operating system or whatever they're selling you, they'll actually give you a license to use it. So yes, you can use the software, you paid for it, but you have limitations on what you can actually do with it. So, like, for example, you can't kind of redesign Windows and tweak it how you want it and then redistribute it as another operating system for an option for those who don't like the stock Windows. But you can do that with Linux, for example, because many Linux distributions will let you do that. Like, Ubuntu's been remastered more times than anybody's can count. So have Debian and Slackware. That's just how it works with Linux. Also the same with Android. Have you guys noticed how some Android phones come with a modified version of Android instead of the Google stock version? Maybe they come with Samsung email or something instead of Gmail. That is because Android is an open source software, and Google allowed Samsung or these other companies to modify and redistribute Android thanks to its open source ability kind of thing. So, I mean, it isn't always great. There are some modified versions of Android that kind of stink, to be honest. And there are some Linux distributions that stink. So, it's not always great, but I definitely prefer it over closed source. So that's what closed source is. Basically, you can't modify or even redistribute it. You don't actually have any ownership to it. It's just a license most of the time. That's what Microsoft and Apple is, pretty much. And then it often has a price. All of those things we don't like. At least I don't. I need my freedom, and you do too. Everybody needs their freedom. Now let's go over open source, or non-proprietary software. It is often free. Most of the time, like 99%, most of the time, open source software is completely free of charge, download and run. And it's most of the time, it's not some of the junky stuff you'd find on your phone or something telling you to upgrade to the next version. Or like, oh, let's upgrade from Windows 7 Professional to Windows 7 Ultimate so we can have things that Linux already has and we'll just pay for it and we still won't have as much that Linux has. That right there is pretty much what closed source is. But open source is often free, but it can still have a price. So it doesn't always mean free. Alright, another thing is, when it's open source, that means the source of where it gets its contributions from is open. Like Microsoft, here, I'll show you a diagram, for example, I'll show you a diagram, for example, right here. Microsoft or Apple, for example, is closed source. So Windows or Mac OS is closed source. The only source they can get contributions from is Microsoft, if you're talking about Windows, or OS X, or Apple for OS X. Okay? But open source, such as Linux, okay, I'll show you that now. Since Linux is open source, it's open to where it gets its sources of contributions from. So it can be from, so let's say Ubuntu, for example. It can be from Canonical, which is the company that makes Ubuntu. It could be from the community. It could be from different countries. It can literally be from anyone. Anybody can contribute to it, which is really nice, and that's why, one of the reasons why I use Linux. A great thing about non-proprietary software or open source software is that since it can get its contributions from anybody most of the time, it mostly will have a large community to help it grow. Therefore, it can set higher standards and get newer features much quicker. You know, we all know how Linux moves on so much faster and gets so much more features than Windows. Windows seems like it's an operating system from like 2005 or something. Like, where Windows 10 is now, that's where Linux was 20 years ago. And that's probably because Microsoft doesn't let the community contribute to their operating system. They leave it all to themselves. They're like, oh, yeah, we're going to fix those bugs, and then never end up doing it. But with Linux, bugs get fixed really quickly, because even if say me, for example, I found a bug in one of the Linux distributions I'm using, I'm just going to go and fix it myself. Easy. And that's why Linux is so much more stable and secure than Microsoft Windows or Apple OS X. That right there. That's one of the main reasons why open source is awesome. It's often free. It's often much more secure than proprietary software. And, you know, everybody does like it. Everybody should like it, at least. I mean, so open source doesn't always mean you're not limited by any license. It often comes with, obviously it can't be fully open source most of the time. It's certainly to an extent, usually by permittable law. Like Debian says, this program is open source to the extent of permittable law. So you do have most of the time open source software is licensed under the GNU GPL, or the General Public License. So that's just the license that most of them come with. It's basically just like, it's stuff that you are not likely to run into, like stuff that's allowed by law and, you know, with GNU and everything. I don't know too much about it, but that is pretty much what that is. So, but long story short, like you'll never really run into anything blocking you from doing that on Linux or even Android. You can still modify your system however you want and do whatever you want with it, of course, to permittable law. So most likely you're not going to do anything that really breaks the law with your computer. Let's just hope. So as I said, open source also gets newer features, higher standards, and it's free. So that's pretty much it. So thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. We'll see you in tomorrow's video, but that's it for now.